Welcome back, architects. We're jumping right into part 3 of our explainer on the massive 10-part tutorial from Virtualization Options LLC. Now, if you don't know them, they're a Colorado-based tech research and advisory group. Today, we're zooming in entirely on Chapter 3, Tunneling Mechanisms. If you're an infrastructure or security architect tasked with dragging your organization's network from IPv4 to IPv6, well, you know this is exactly where pristine networking theory crashes headfirst into messy production reality. You've got legacy systems that refuse to upgrade, gnarly routing domains, and all that technical debt. This explainer is built specifically for you to navigate that reality using their research. We're pulling this straight from their official Architecture, Security, and Firewall Designs tutorial. What's great about this documentation is that it completely strips away the vendor marketing fluff. It just looks at the raw RFCs and what actually happens on the wire. So today, we're taking a highly technical dive into what I call the illusion of the safe tunnel. Because, as you'll see, just wrapping your traffic in a neat little package to get it from point A to point B, yeah, that doesn't make it inherently safe. Here is our agenda. First, the tunneling concept. Second, operational advantages. Third, operational disadvantages. And finally, the security blind spots. Starting with Section 1, the tunneling concept and bypassing incompatible infrastructure. So the core takeaway here is that tunneling is a bridge. It relies entirely on encapsulation, not translation. Why does that matter to us? Well, when you use a translation mechanism like NUT64, you're mangling packet headers, rewriting IP addresses, basically breaking the internet's end-to-end principle. Tunneling just completely sidesteps that mess. You're taking a perfectly intact IPv6 packet and wrapping it up inside an IPv4 header so it can hitch a ride across your legacy infrastructure. It's literally like putting a fully sealed letter into a larger envelope to mail it across the country. Now, what's fascinating is the sheer variety of protocols you can use to pull this off. The tutorial outlines some heavy hitters, 6 and 4, 6 to 4, Teredo, ISAP, DS Lite, and MAP-E. And every single one solves a slightly different architectural puzzle. For instance, 6 and 4 is your static configured tunnel, super predictable. Compare that to 6 to 4, which dynamically derives the IPv6 address, but relies on anycast relays that can, well, they can be pretty unreliable. Or take Teredo, which is designed to aggressively punch right through your NAT boundaries using UDP. It's a huge toolkit, but remember, every tool comes with its own unique and sometimes heavy operational footprint. Moving on to Section 2, Operational Advantages and why architects choose tunnels. When you stand up a static tunnel like 6 and 4, you get some undeniable benefits right out of the gate. First, a completely deterministic path. You define the exact endpoints, which means zero anycast routing uncertainty for your engineers to troubleshoot at 2 a.m. Second, full MTU control. You, the operator, set it explicitly. Third, perimeter monitoring is straightforward. You just drop standard ACLs on both endpoints to watch for Protocol 41, which is the official IP protocol member for IPv6 encapsulation. And finally, it's administratively intentional. There's no opportunistic behavior happening behind your back. It only does what you tell it to do, which is fantastic for baseline architecture. But of course, that brings us to Section 3, Operational Disadvantages and the Friction of Reality. This perfectly illustrates the core trade-off. On one side, you have that beautiful, granular control over things like MTU. But on the flip side, configuring these static, one-to-one administrative relationships manually simply does not scale across an enterprise. Picture a network with thousands of branch offices. Having your team manually update static tunnel configs, juggle IPs, and tweak ACLs across every edge device is an absolute operational nightmare. It's incredibly rigid and breaks down the second your network needs to scale dynamically. And then, we have to talk about the physics of the packet itself, specifically the 20-byte IPv4 header overhead. Because you're wrapping one protocol inside another, you're tacking 20 bytes of permanent dead weight onto every single packet. That shrinks your effective MTU and demands incredibly careful path MTU discovery, or a PMTUD handling. Now, PMTUD relies on ICMPv4 fragmentation needed messages. If your firewalls aggressively drop all ICMP traffic, which is a super common but misguided practice, your path MTU discovery completely breaks. Your routers start silently dropping overly large packets, creating these mysterious network black holes that are just brutal to diagnose. Overhead aside, this right here is the pivot point of our whole analysis. The stark reality highlighted in the tutorial is this: configured tunnels lack built-in authentication between endpoints. The Protocol 41 standard itself does not inherently verify who is actually sending that encapsulated packet. There's no handshake, no crypto signature, no built-in trust mechanism whatsoever. Which leads us directly into Section 4, the security blind spots, when functional doesn't mean secure. I really want you to ask yourselves this right now. What actually happens when your legacy edge firewall sees a packet flagged as Protocol 41? Because the answer to that completely dictates your perimeter security posture. Here are the exact mechanics of the firewall bypass vulnerability straight from Chapter 3. Step 1. The outer IPv4 header hits your perimeter firewall. Step 2. Because you actually need the tunnel to work for production, your firewall has an explicit rule permitting Protocol 41. It looks at the outer header, sees the approved protocol, and says, yep, come on in. Step 3. The inner IPv6 payload, which could literally be packing malicious code targeted at an internal server, slips by completely uninspected. The firewall basically checked the return address on the outer envelope, approved the delivery, and never once looked at the dangerous letter hidden inside. And this blind spot opens the door wide to endpoint injection. Since there's no built-in authentication, anyone on the internet who can spoof the outer IPv4 source address can inject malicious traffic directly into your tunnel. Imagine an attacker out there crafts a packet. They spoof the outer IPv4 IP to perfectly match your trusted branch office router. Inside, they pack a weaponized IPv6 payload aiming right at your core data center and fire it at your headquarters. Your firewall sees the trusted IP, sees Protocol 41, and just waves it through. The receiving endpoint unpacks it, and because it has no way to cryptographically verify the sender, it processes that weaponized packet as totally legitimate internal traffic. The Virtualization Options LLC tutorial makes this undeniably clear. Quote, every transition mechanism introduces a distinct attack surface. Tunnels bypass perimeter controls. Default IPv4 rule sets protect absolutely none of these mechanisms. If you're relying on legacy IPv4 firewall policies to guard your tunneled environment, you are operating with a massive invisible security gap. Which leaves us with this final provocative thought to end our explainer today. Since we know from the source material that tunnels inherently bypass standard perimeter controls, where exactly are you enforcing your security? If your perimeter firewall is totally blind to the payload passing through it, are your actual end hosts verifying the source? It's a critical architectural question you absolutely have to answer before letting these IPv6 transition technologies out of the lab and into the wild. Thanks for joining me for this breakdown of Chapter 3, and keep building securely.